Good Monday evening. I was going to say morning almost. It's evening now. It's been a long weekend. We are now in February. It's February 2nd, 2026. It's the week after the storm, I could call it now, because this was an all-timer for a lot of locations here on a Monday. We had a hard refreeze this morning, and guess what? We're going to see more of that tonight. So let's get right to your impact headlines, because we saw some melting today. We did make it into the 40s, some sun with clouds, but there was melting. Refreezing, icy spots, warmer with some clouds tomorrow, and midweek showers. I think we'll talk a lot about this, rumors of snowflakes and other things. It's not that I don't think there couldn't be flakes somewhere in our area. It's not going to be a big deal, and it looks like it's going to be centered more to our east, which I'll talk about in a minute. But we got to talk about this morning. 10 degrees, okay? That was a record low. We tied the record set back in 1917, and we were one of the warmer spots this morning, which tells you just how cold it is. We saw a lot of single digits and even below zero. Siler City in the central part of the state got down to 0, and Lumberton got down to 1 below. So it was really, really cold this morning. I wanted to recap today because it was a huge jump, 32-degree jump in temperature from 10 this morning to 42 this afternoon. We will likely be even warmer than that tomorrow. But let's look back at the weekend storm. Our season total, this is for the whole season now, stands at 12.2. So we are over a foot of snow for the season. If you look back in the last 10 years, you can add all those up, and they don't equal what we got just in one weekend. What a crazy storm it was. We could talk about all the historical parts of this. 4th biggest one-day storm, 6th biggest multi-day storm, and really the most snow we've seen in any storm since 2004. I was there in 2004. This had some similarities as far as how heavy it was at times, some drifting, but also there was some differences. This was super dry snow. I don't ever remember a snow this powdery in the Carolinas. In some cases, 22 to 25 to 1 liquid to snowfall ratios, which means if this was rainfall, it would have only been like a half an inch of rain. That tells you how much fluff we had to it. In fact, that's less than how much precipitation we had during the ice storm the weekend before, which was almost an inch of sleet and 0.3 of an inch of ice. But we have seen big changes. 24-hour temperature change. Pretty significant, 5, 6, 7, even 10 degrees warmer. Tonight, this is all going to be kind of skeptical here, because I don't think we're going to be this warm in some spots. Where that snowpack is most prevalent, I'm not going to be shocked, especially up in here, the area that got 14 to 15 inches. You're going to see some lower teens, maybe even some upper single digits. Like a 9 or something isn't going to be shocking me. But everybody's in the teens in your 20s. It's plenty cold enough to refreeze anything that has melted today. Tomorrow, temperatures warm up. We get back maybe close to 50. That's with some clouds. The key part here is that southwest wind, which should help warm up and melt a lot of that snow. So, middle of the week, interesting storm. We've got a cold front coming in. Pretty straightforward with the first part of this. It's all rain. Rain on Tuesday night into Wednesday. The front moves through. Cold air tries to move back in going into Thursday. A low pressure forms on the front. Might throw some moisture back up over the front. We could see some snow flurries north or northeast of us. I'm not super inclined to believe this is going to be a big deal, because cold air chasing moisture never really works very often. And even if the worst case scenario sets up, this has no impact. It's just a few wet snowflakes mixing with rain, which likely melt on contact. The low temperature Wednesday night to Thursday is like 31, so it's barely marginal for anything issue-wise. But I'll show you what it looks like here. We'll go futurecast clouds tomorrow. Here comes the rain. Now, notice Wednesday, it's mostly rain, but we see some blue on here. So let's kind of highlight some areas. You see where the snow is showing up in our short-range guidance. We do have a few snowflakes up here, but I think it's more over in here, like the Raleigh area east. That's an area I'll watch, because the low pressure system is more likely going to have some moisture to work with to our east. And so wrapping back to the northwest would mean some of these areas in here could see some snow. So if there's one area that could see, and maybe some wet snow, half an inch, certainly looks like nothing over an inch over there, but even there, I doubt it's going to amount to a whole lot. We need the rain. Lost in the snow and the ice the last 2 weeks. Wasn't a lot of moisture. We missed our drought monitor. We didn't really play much about it last week or talk about it, but we've got moderate to severe drought for most of our area. We need rainfall. The snow, as I mentioned, only had a half an inch of liquid in it, so it's not like it's going to do a whole lot to help out with the moisture. I'll quickly show you the drought monitor because we didn't really show it last week because we were all talking about the snow, but look at this. I mean, the entire state of North and South Carolina is in some form of drought, and most of us are in severe drought. So we desperately need this moisture. So whatever comes in the middle of the week, we're going to need it. It's going to be much needed rainfall. I actually hope it's a whole bunch, but it doesn't look like that much. Now, the next question I'm getting, pattern change. When are we going to melt all this? When's it going to warm up? When is spring? Technically spring, regardless of what the ground rat told you today. That's coming up at the end of February. February is a really unique month. I don't know if you've looked at the calendar, but it's like a perfect month, right? The 1st was on a Sunday. The 28th is on a Saturday. So like it's 4 complete full weeks.
Look at a calendar. We haven't had school in a week and a half.
I
I don't
know
know what day it is.
I just noticed that today. I'm like, that's like a perfect month. It's like a perfect square month. Every week is 7 days in the month.
There you go.
You don't get that very often. 28 days. So like a perfect month. I mean, it is crazy. But we technically, climatologically, once we get to March 1st, that's the beginning of spring. But we know in the Carolinas, first 2 weeks of March, very, very historic events have happened snowfall-wise the first 2 weeks. So we don't write off winter weather yet, but there is sign of a pretty significant pattern change here in February. February can be crazy warm. We've had some crazy warm ones in the past. You can get severe weather in February. That's certainly happened, but a warming trend is more likely than anything going to start pushing in, but it's going to take a while to get here. It's not going to really get here until maybe next week at this time. So your Jerry Hunt Supercenter 7-day, got that rain on Wednesday, late Wednesday, early Thursday. Could you see a few wet snowflakes? Sure. I don't think it's going to be a big deal, but stay tuned. I mean, obviously things could change. You see the temperatures, 31 and 39. I wouldn't call that warm, but that's certainly not great snowmaking weather like we just had. Winter Olympics start on Friday, opening ceremony. Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday right here on WCNC. And also Artemis II, which will hopefully launch, but it may or may not. We're going to talk about that coming up here in a couple minutes. But that is when the launch window is open on Sunday evening. So we'll see if we get a launch there. Either way, it's going to start warming up around here. Temperatures next week are back near 60. The average high now is 54. So a warm-up is on the way. Stick around. We'll talk more about the weekend storm. We'll talk a little bit about Artemis and get you ready for a week of melting. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. I was calling it the day after. It's kind of like now 2 days after. But Alex Williams joins us from WFMY. Tim's getting some much-needed time off after the weekend. And Alex, you guys kind of were in a spot that got a lot more snow than some others, and you had some pretty crazy totals up there. Talk a little bit about what you guys saw over the weekend and some of the totals, your highest totals at least you guys had in your viewing area. Ours was around Kannapolis, but not too far from there. You guys had some big totals up that way as well. Pretty much up 85 between Charlotte and Greensboro.
Yeah, Davidson County was our big winner, I've got some of the snow totals pulled up there. Wow. On Max. Yeah, you can see some of them. There you go. Trinity, 16.2 inches, 16 inches for Lexington. Our own Amber Lake was there, and you can just see the massive piles of snow. And then even into the Triad, Brad, we're talking double-digit snowfall, 10.3 inches at Greensboro. That set the record at PTI. Set a record, I should say. 6th place all time. Wow.
So what was what is your all-time highest total for Greensboro? Do you know offhand? Like the 10.3, where does that rank compared to that?
Yeah, I actually have that board there. There you go. There's our top 6. So 20 inches. Okay. And that was set back in 1927.
Wow. Man, 20 inches. That is crazy to think that. That's big. Ours is only 14.
You guys saw some good snow, too.
Yeah, this was definitely, it was our biggest since 2004. I remember that storm. I was actually my second year here, and even then I thought, man, this is like a legit snowstorm. And this one had a lot of similarities where it just felt like it never stopped. But I had this great map that I pulled today because I wanted to wait till more totals came in. And, yeah, you kind of see that hot spot between us, Alex, kind of between Charlotte and Winston-Salem up to Greensboro. There was a band that kind of formed there early on in the storm, and it just didn't move for like the longest time. And we have a camera in Kannapolis, which is right on the Cabarrus-Rowan County line. And I was watching it all day Saturday. It was crazy. The flakes were just big and coming down. It was like a whiteout, like nonstop. And that's also where we had that horrible, it wasn't really a pileup, but an accident / backup, whatever you want to call it, on 85. But it kind of made sense. That was probably the worst snow, and 85 had the worst issues. What are some of the lingering impacts you guys are noticing? Obviously, we have refreeze last night and tonight, but what are some of the things that are happening up your way that has really been kind of a lingering impact from the snow?
Yeah, what we're seeing here, Brad, is really the neighborhoods, those far back roads, plow, crews not getting to that. I will say secondary roads were cleared in Greensboro. Primary roads are good to go, and that's what we're hearing across the Triad as well. But it's really those neighborhoods. I mean, some people didn't get rid of, the slush and the sleet from the last event, and then. Yeah. On top of that, now that we've put snow on top of that. So they're really having trouble, trying to get out of their neighborhoods and to clear some of that snow out.
Yeah, that's been a similar issue I've noticed here. And anything in the shade the last 2 days is just like not moving. It's just, you get in the sun, and like part of my street is like we actually shoveled all day Sunday. And we have blacktop on our cul-de-sac, and most of it melted. But up the street on a hill, it's in the shade. It's completely covered in ice. It's like, and I think there's a lot of neighborhoods like that where it's like the road's deceiving. It's really good in one spot, and then you get to another, and it's like, feels like it hasn't been cleared at all. So we're looking at some aerials of what the streets look like. There's still so much snow on the side of the roads, and I think that's the other concern. These piles are going to be melting, and you're going to get water into the road, and then it refreezes. We had the Weather Channel was actually in Charlotte for this storm. They probably should have sent Cantori, but they sent Reynolds Wolf, and he filed a report today about what was happening here in Charlotte as we clean up from our record-breaking snow.
I'm meteorologist Reynolds Wolf coming from the Queen City, Charlotte, North Carolina, where, well, the skies are clear. That's good, but if you look all around you, you got some snow. They had a record snowfall over the weekend. 11 inches of snowfall, broke a daily record, and really the heaviest snowfall they've had going back to 2004. So it has been more than a minute. What's amazing, though, is over the next several days, we can expect temperatures to go up, and as they do so, a lot of what you see here in terms of the snow will be gone. However, there are some problems that remain. The governor has has urged people to stay off the roadways for today and let nature do its work. Certainly, they have been doing their job. Some 1,200 crews around the state trying to treat some 80,000 miles of roadway. So it's been a very tall order, but if you can do your part and stay off the roads, that is what the governor is asking, and that certainly is what we advise. Reporting from Charlotte, North Carolina, Reynolds Wolf, the Weather Channel.
Yeah, it's kind of, I had even my family and friends in other parts of the country reached out to me and go, you guys doing okay? Because I guess, Charlotte was in the national spotlight for getting this record snow. But Alex, what I thought was interesting about this storm, there's a lot of things we could dive into meteorologically. It was pretty fascinating, but it was almost like two systems, right? We had this upper low and this meso low in the western Carolinas, and then on the coast we had this nor'easter, and obviously that was referred to as a bomb cyclone, which technically it did qualify as a bomb cyclone. It dropped pressure, but we weren't really impacted by the coastal low. It was really that other low that did the snow for us. So I thought it was interesting that, across the country, I think people think it was just this one storm, but it was kind of two pieces that and when you look at the snowfall maps, there's two distinct maximums in snowfall, and then all the snow lovers in Raleigh got dry slotted between them and didn't really get much snow.
Yeah, I've got that dry slot risk, and Tim got a lot of heat for putting that map up, and but it actually panned out. I mean, it was fascinating, Brad. The fact that we got that steady stream, and so that must have been just being locked between the meso low and then the coastal low, just getting that steady stream of moisture. And I mean, we were approaching midnight, and manager was like, "Hey, so when's this going to cut off?" And we're like, "Well, your guess is best as ours at this point, because it's just continuing, and it was heavy snow too. It was very high snowfall rates."
Yeah, we had the same thing. Initially, we saw the 11 inches, but then the observer at the airport reached out to me and said, hey, after midnight, we got another 0.4 of an inch because it didn't stop at midnight. It was still going when we thought it would be done a lot sooner. You're so right. I went back and looked and calculate the snowfall ratio. It was even higher than I expected, Alex. I thought maybe 15 to 20 to 1. We ended up somewhere around 22, 23 to 1. Just crazy. Only a half an inch of liquid produced almost a foot of snow. That is just unheard of in the Carolinas. So it was crazy to see that. What were your kind of ratios up there, did you guys figure?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we were closer to that 20 to 1. I mean, it was very light, fluffy snow. In fact, about every hour, Tim brought in his leaf blower, and we would just go out to where we cleared it and blow the snow off. I mean, it was that light, that fluffy, and it just added up very quickly. Yeah.
But let's talk about the coastal low, because some of the totals on the coast rivaled what we saw here in the Piedmont for a completely different reason. I'm trying to think what the biggest total. I have maybe 18 inches out there somewhere on the coast. I saw
think
video
it was just north of Myrtle Beach.
Yeah. And I saw some video today from Atlantic Beach, which blew my mind. It was like all you could see was snow drifts everywhere, because they had this 40, 50 mile an hour winds that were blowing these drifts, which were huge out there. And Cantori was out there because they had legit blizzard conditions, even though they never got the warning. But also a lot of beach erosion we saw today. We had 2 more houses succumb to the ocean out there. So it's been a rough couple of, I would say, 6 or 7 months on the Outer Banks. It feels like every nor'easter or hurricane has just impacted them. So it was really kind of interesting to see that out on the coast. Before we move on to our next subject, we're going to talk a little bit about Artemis here. What are some of the things that stuck out to you about this storm that maybe surprised you, but also were kind of like what you expected?
I think the thing that surprised me was just that persistent band of heavy snow that we had for several hours. And I mean, it showed that we would get a band, but to have a persistent band and just watching, I was in charge during the storm of just refreshing snow totals and watching them. And you just watch them pile up higher and higher and higher and higher and go over, I was like, oh, we're at a foot. And now we're at 13 inches. We're at 14. It just kept going up and up and up. And with it didn't seem to be stopping, and it was just mind blowing. And then going out into the weather garden and watching the snow just pile up higher and higher and higher and higher, and Tim are like, wow, this is impressive. I think what did pan out, unfortunately for those in the triangle, right, the dry slot panned out. It started to be picked up. We talked about that trend, and that did definitely verify. But how do you predict such a narrow snow band that is going to set itself up and bring record-breaking snowfall to the area?
Yeah, I think that's what's. I would agree with you. I think the duration and the amounts surprised us, but not that we didn't think someone was going to get that. It was just hard to say where, like you mentioned. Like, I didn't think that would be right over us. I thought maybe a little bit farther south or a little bit east of us, but the fact that it's set up right over us was kind of like the rare case, because normally the snow lovers around here, it always forms somewhere else. It's never over us. And lo and behold, this is the one time the heaviest snow band set up right where everybody lives. So I know the folks up in Raleigh, were you guys sweating that dry slide out a little bit? Maybe it was going to creep towards you guys a little bit?
We thought that, we were watching it very closely, and that's why with that dry slot, Tim brought it a little bit, that low to medium chance between us and the triangle. But it just, with that persistent snow band, it was right there, and then the dry air, So Alamance, I think, got a little bit affected by that drier air, but they eventually started to fill in as that heavier snow band finally started to shift eastward.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The gradient across that was pretty crazy, and you see that. So we got to turn our attention to another big event that's coming up. We're kind of proud of here at the station. We're going to be covering Artemis II, streaming out of here. The launch window was a bigger window. It's been whittled down to one day now. It's coming up on Sunday, and because of the same cold air that impacted us, Alex, it impacted them down in Florida. They're going through their wet dress rehearsal today, and because of that cold snap, they actually had to shorten their window down to Sunday. But we got a report from down there in Cocoa Beach about the preparations for this huge mission from NASA to go back to the moon.
Another cold morning in Florida, records dropping across the state as temperatures yet again drop down into the 20s and 30s. Here in Cocoa Beach, it is cold. Temperatures significantly colder than we should be, only warming into the 50s this afternoon when we should be in the 70s. But we're in Cocoa Beach because it's an important day today. You can see behind me Cape Canaveral as NASA is pushing ahead with the Artemis II wet launch later on this evening. What does that mean for you? It's a dress rehearsal for the actual launch. Basically, they are filling the rocket with the 700,000 gallons of hydrogen and oxygen. They're doing all the steps right up to an actual launch, which they will not be doing the actual launch today. This is the test run, and things need to go smoothly with this to actually do the launch. The launch window currently opens on February 8th, so we will be watching that with bated breath as humans will be going to and around the moon for the first time in many years. In Cocoa Beach, I'm Felicia Combs, the Weather Channel.
Yeah, so that's going to be coming up this weekend. The window opens on Sunday evening. Right now, this is a live picture. We can take a look. They're going through what's called the wet rehearsal. I want to say dry. It's wet because they're actually loading fuel into the rocket. They actually had a small delay today because of a leak, but that's kind of expected. That's the whole point of doing this. So they pushed it back a little bit. They're fueling it now. Some really cool things they do. It's just not about fueling the tanks. They actually kind of remove all the oxygen from the compartment so that there's no contaminants in there, and it keeps everything kind of in its original state. I thought this was fascinating. It's dangerous, but also important to do this. You can't have humans there, obviously, because there's no oxygen in there, but that's the whole point. They don't want anything to decay or get disrupted, so they actually fuel the whole capsule full. I believe it's nitrogen primarily that they put in there, and so that there's nothing that can actually get damaged while they're doing this. But it's also dangerous. That's why they have nobody near there, because you could actually, basically suffocate if you're near this. But this is a live view. They're doing it right now, the fuel test. James, I don't know. I haven't seen anything since that initial leak. It looks like everything so far seems to be going okay.
Yeah, we've been keeping an eye on it here on Live Impact News throughout the day. They did pause a little bit on this Monday afternoon. They have resumed testing. They think it seems like they've got maybe that leak under control. But Brad, if you remember, we had something kind of similar with Artemis I that kind of caused all the timelines to slip. So we're waiting kind of on bated breath here to see how the rest of this wet dress rehearsal goes. And then tomorrow, Tuesday at noon, we're expected to hear from NASA officials on whether or not they're going to go for that Sunday launch potential. Yeah, so a little bit different from Artemis I, which, if you remember, they had these leak issues. They had to roll the whole thing back to the assembly building and do a bunch of tests. This go around,
they actually can keep it out there for up to 2 windows, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
So there's a launch window this weekend, which was supposed to be longer. It got shortened by 2 days. Now it goes Sunday, Monday, possibly Tuesday. I'm not sure when the drop dead date is on this window. I think it's Monday or Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken.
It's during the overnight hours. So
Yeah, it's some
then
weird.
After that, we got to wait a month.
Yeah, so you got to wait a minute because you got to remember this. We're going to the moon, so this is all based on the lunar cycle. So it has to be close to that calendar. So they can leave it out there. If we don't go this weekend, they can wait another month, go through that window before they would ever have to roll it back to the assembly building, and then likely recharge things, have to go do some testing and stuff. So unlike Artemis I, they've got a little bit more leeway to leave it out there. But James and I were talking, and Alex, you could chime in on this. With this Arctic blast that we had, there's this concern, like, did the cold temperatures have some type of impact on the rocket? And will that cause the delays to be further? Because we didn't talk much about this, but they had Arctic air all the way down to South Florida. They had freeze warnings. I was looking at blueberry crops today that got damaged. They even had snow in Tampa. I could not believe that was the craziest thing I ever
I was
saw.
going to say snow in Tampa. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't see that very often, but it kind of shows you how big this cold air mass was that came in behind our storm, and it really kind of, impacted the whole southeast. Iguanas falling out of trees. If I see another iguana meme, I'm going to be really, I'm going to throw up. They've been everywhere, but it does go to show you, and it'll be curious to see how the weather plays a big part in this. Because as we know, we had tragedy because of cold weather before with launches. Icicles formed, and that actually was one of the things that caused issues. So that's something we're going to be watching. I don't know if you're a big space person, Alex, but are you excited for Artemis II? What is your thoughts on this as we get ready for the first launch window?
I think going back to the moon is awesome.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since we've been there, and so the fact that we're getting ready to do another mission and to learn something, learn more, maybe take in some more information about the lunar's effect, the moon's effect, the lunar effects on the Earth, like our tides. And I mean, if we're talking about tides, we're talking about what Highway 12 is dealing with in the coastal Carolinas. Unfortunately, this system also occurred, as you mentioned earlier, this week with a full moon. So the moon's impact is important on the Earth, and maybe how far do they go with this dress rehearsal? I know they're not going to ignite anything, but like how are they? What are they checking as they're going through this dress rehearsal?
So the goal is to completely fuel the rocket fully, like they were going to launch, and it's basically to test for leaks and make sure everything is working. And then they can defuel it, because obviously you don't want to leave some of the stuff fueled up because it's literally a bomb sitting on the launch pad. But yeah, I'm excited too because it's 2026, Alex, and we have HD TV now, and we have all these ways to view it, unlike we did in the 60s and 70s. So I think from that standpoint, the visual part of this and social media, that everybody gets to see this happen, is going to be really cool. We're going to be talking more about this throughout the week because that window comes up this weekend. But stick around. We're done for live weather now, but we'll have more news coming up after the break.